Hi, this is Jamie Sheehan, and this is my assignment for Games Development Practicum, a game titled, as you can see here, Shield Hero. Shield Hero is intended to be a challenging action platformer that's sure to put your skills to the test, with a variety of different types of enemies. Now, the explanation of the game. In Shield Hero, the player will have to progress through a series of different levels, facing off against different types of enemies, melee enemies, and flying enemies. They'll be set up in pre-orchestrated, pre-designed patterns, and they will also, as well as overcoming these enemies, they will also have to best difficult platforming segments on their way to meeting the final boss, where they will hopefully encounter quite a challenge. You can see what the boss fight looks like, well, a peek of it in the background of this image. Now, some of the key mechanics. The most important mechanics with Shield Hero relate to the combat and movement of the game. This took quite a lot of work in terms of the logic behind the C# scripting and the manipulation of the different animations and the state of the different animation controllers and the AI. Also, for this game, a third-person camera was developed to align more closely to what was needed for a third-person action role-playing game. Now, some of the innovative and key features. The original inspiration for this game would have been similar games of the action RPG genre, a la Dark Souls and Bloodborne and anything else from Soft-like. It therefore includes typical features of this genre, the challenging combat, carefully designed encounters, whether it be platforming encounters or combat encounters, and the build to a challenging boss fight. Also, excuse me. Also, these games put a great deal of importance on the management of the different stats. In most of these games, you have health and stamina. Shield Hero seeks to set itself apart by presenting a greater deal of platforming. It also has the energy mechanic. The energy mechanic is where you must defend before you can attack. In order to be able to deal damage to enemies, you must first block their attacks to deal damage back onto them. And also, you have an AoE attack from the beginning to deal damage to waves of enemies. Okay, some of the challenging features to implement. Firstly, I wanted to allow for the player to save their progress. Progress, in this case, being saved each time you clear a level. This was achieved using player prefs. If I'd wanted to, we could have used JSON and then hashed some code to keep track of the player's progress, but I was not too preoccupied with security and preventing people progress to further levels if they so chose. Development of cutscenes. We achieved cutscenes via use of timelines and Cinemachine. This made it much easier to give the cinematic appearance that you'll see in the cutscenes. Calculating the blocking angle for shield. I didn't want this to be a case whereby just by blocking the player could block attacks from all angles. So we used the vector tree angle function, which would calculate the angle between the player's forward vector and the vector created between the enemy's position and the player's position. And if the angle was too wide, then the player would still take damage even when they're blocking. Then hit detection. I used the physics overlap sphere function to detect. Firstly, I would cast a sphere with a given range. The range depending on whether the attack was melee attack or shield bash attack or shield burst. And then if any physics objects were within this sphere, I would then detect what their tag was, and if they were enemies, it would deal damage to them. Now that is the end of that is the end of the presentation section of this demonstration. We'll now move on to the actual gameplay. Okay, here we are on the home screen or the landing screen, whatever you'd like to refer to it. As you can see, we have 4 buttons. We have the play button, the continue button, the controls button, and the quit button. Quit button exits the game, quite simply. Controls will show us the controls for the game. And I'll go in and show you this briefly now. As you can see, some of the controls here: to attack, to shield burst, shield bash, move, run, etc. Go back to the home. We can now see the other 2 buttons, the play button and the continue button. Now, seeing as we're under the assumption now that I haven't cleared any levels, we'll first press the play button, because once we have cleared levels, continue button will take us to as far as we've gotten in terms of levels. And here we have the game world. You can see a bit of it here. The desert environment, the first level. You can see how the camera's manipulated. It orbits around the player, and the player rotates with it. You can see here that the camera, despite me trying to put it down, won't clip through the ground. This is done using ray casts in the upwards and downwards direction, and in left and right, and if it collides with any and if it gets too close to any objects, it won't clip through them. Now let us see part of the platforming segment. You can see that all these platforms are moving with static platforms in between to make sure that the timing isn't too difficult to achieve. And we'll skip onto the combat section later on in the level. And we'll see this. I'm about to miss a jump here. Don't react too badly here, but you'll see it, and you'll see what happens when I do fall to my death, presumably, with this jump. Okay. Now you see I was respawned to a respawn point set earlier in the game. This happens every time you enter a kill box, which they're referred to, and also, obviously, you lose health on this happening as well. Okay, I've now gotten past the platforming segment. We can pretend I did that on the first try. I didn't, but here we are now at the next segment of the game. As you can see, we have this large shield object, and attached to this object, we have a trigger volume. And on entering this trigger volume, a cutscene will be triggered using Timeline and Cinemachine. And in this cutscene, I'll be deactivating the playable character and will be activating a purely animatable character for use within cutscenes. You can see here the cutscene starts running. And you'll notice once I get to the end of the cutscene, firstly we have particle effects that fire off here. And then we have the enemy spawns in. You can see initially I'm outside of the enemy's detection range, so they just stand there. They're idle. You'll see this pause menu, which I forgot to show off previously. It allows me to go back to the main menu or quit. Now if we continue on the game, and I walk towards the enemy. Well, firstly, I'd like to show off some of the combat without actually getting into the enemy's attack range. You'll see here to the left, I have an energy meter, the blue one. I have health, the red meter, and I have stamina, the green meter. Health goes down getting hit, stamina goes down with taking actions, and energy is used up to make attacks. See, if I use a shield bash by pressing right click, the energy goes down by a bit, and if I press Q to use the shield burst, particles released, and the energy goes down by quite a bit more. Now I've used up most of my energy, but if I want to get some back, you can see I block enemies' attack, and the shield energy went up. I'm not quite within range here, I think, in this section, so I'm not actually getting energy, but the enemy is trying to attack me. But if I step closer, now the energy does go up. And I'm just gonna try and finish up this enemy here. See, I'll use the shield burst here in a moment. And you can see how much more damage that does as opposed to the bash. You can see there. And I'm going to try and finish this guy off. And you see the red door to the right? Keep your eye on that. And see it turns blue. This is the signal that we've defeated the wave of enemies that are barring the way to the next level. And so if we walk into this blue light now, I should progress to the next level. And there we go, we're on to the second level. Unlike the outdoor environment of the first level, this is an indoor environment. We also have these platforms. Unlike the automatic moving platforms at the first level, these are manually moving, triggered by the player stepping on them. Here we have a maze section, and you'll see some enemies. I had a few difficulties with the lighting on in this section of the game. Now you might see the enemy now is actually moving despite not detecting the player. This is because the enemy has a patrol function, which I've set up for this specific enemy. There's 4 patrol points set up, which the enemy will cycle through, and this cycle won't be interrupted unless it detects the player. You can see now if I step into its detection range, it begins combat. I'll just skip on to more important sections of the game, past this whole section. Now, we're in a separate room. And in this room we have 2 enemies, but also 2 other objects. You can see the red one and also the blue one. These are potions. The red one will increase your health, and the blue one will increase your stamina. Or, apologies, your energy. You can see now, if I walk into the red one, yeah, you can see my health increases. Now, after defeating the other enemy, my energy increased from the blue one. Now we come to the final part of this level, where we'll see the flying enemy type, and also a cutscene will be triggered. Now, you see the flying enemy starts to approach. This is because it's within the detection range. But unlike the melee enemy, the flying enemy will keep a certain distance from the player character, and once it gets to this distance, it will have a certain ranged attack that will start to fire. Now you see the lasers firing at the player. You can step out of the way of them. You can see it takes damage there, and if I block it, energy increases. However, if I step close enough to this enemy, you'll see that it also has a melee attack. And I'll just dispatch of this guy now, so you've seen all his abilities. I'll give you a short glimpse of the 3rd level. Now, we're in the 3rd level. I'm not actually going to show any of this level. I just wanted to show a bit of the continue functionality. So if I go in and quit now from this point, or not quit, rather, go to the main menu from here. And now if I press continue, I should go back to the 3rd level, rather than starting over from the beginning. And there you go. Yeah, that's everything for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much.